Mo Salah has officially left my Game Week 1 FPL team and he might be gone for good. So in this video, I'm going to reveal my current FPL draft and I do think it is the best that I've built so far in pre-season. As always, if you're new around here, please do consider smashing that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. And of course, if you look forward to today's video, please do consider smashing that like button, aim for 100 on this video. So enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So as well as Mo Salah leaving my current FPL team, which we will come on to in a minute, we need to talk about, of course, the current chip strategy, because I think this season, more than ever, is so important to understand when you plan on using your wildcard. And a quick reminder, this is the first season where we get to roll free transfers up to 5 times. And also, when we activate our wildcard, we still keep any free transfers that we've accumulated throughout the season. Whereas in previous years, if we had 2 free transfers, used our wildcard, we would come back to only 1 free transfer available. So that is really, really important. And at the time recording right now, I have changed my chip strategy to wildcard in game week 4. And I need to go over exactly why I'm planning on doing so, because it is quite an aggressive chip strategy. So first up, of course, I'm going to be looking to target the teams with favourable first 3 fixtures. That is a given. And end of the day, when we're building a Game Week 1 team, all of us are looking to target the teams with great opening fixtures. So just going to put on your screens right now some of the teams that are under consideration if you were to be on this strategy, because end of the day, we're only looking at those opening 3 fixtures. Newcastle with arguably the best opening 3, especially with Southampton at home in Game Week 1. I think we're all on Alexander Isak, but it's whether you want to double or triple up. Spoiler alert, I of course have tripled up with Newcastle in my current team. But outside of that, Nottingham Forest looking really good for those opening 3 fixtures. Everton, I think, defensively offer great value in the likes of Pickford and Mikalenko. City are always going to be fantastic. And I think after seeing Chelsea in pre-season, we're not too concerned about game week 1. And then, of course, some other options available, like Brentford, if you can avoid game week 2. Fulham, Arsenal in particular, the ones I'm interested in. I think we all know that game weeks 2, 4 and 5 are really difficult. But if you're in a position where you're wildcarding in game week 4 and you just look at a 3 game week period, game weeks 1 and 3 are amazing for Arsenal. And I do think they are going to be really key in our game week 1 teams if we are doing this wildcard strategy. And also Liverpool, very difficult to ignore Liverpool with Ipswich, Brentford and Man United. And it's worth noting they are one of the few teams that not only have good opening 3 fixtures, but long-term fixtures as well. So those are the current teams we are currently targeting. Of course, we will go on to my team later on. So next up, I want to target the players that have had a full pre-season. I think doing this early wildcard is the best way to do so. There are a lot of players out there like Odegaard, like Erling Haaland, like Mo Salah that are going to have a couple of weeks on those players that have actually had longer summers due to the Euros. And I really think having an early wildcard means that we can have the best of both worlds. We can target those players that are obviously going to be starting with full minutes in the bank during pre-season, like a Martin Odegaard, knowing that around game week 4, all of these players that have missed pre-season will likely be up to speed. Then we can use the wildcard to maybe take out those players that maybe long-term aren't the best options like Odegaard and replace them with the ones that we truly want, like a Bukayo Saka when we know he is fully fit. Otherwise, if we push our wildcard later on in the season and we start off with Bukayo Saka and Phil Foden, if they haven't actually gotten themselves fit for game week 1, we could be holding on these players in the hope that they just hit the ground running. I think with the game week 4 wildcard, we can hit the players that have had full pre-season and then we can bring in the ones we truly want from game week 4 onwards. Now, as I said here, in the same breath, this means I'm looking to avoid those players that have had 0 pre-season minutes. And of course, we still have a couple of weeks until game week 1, so things can change. But we're not expecting those Man City players like De Bruyne, Foden, Walker until game week 1. And also the Arsenal players like Saka and Rice won't be returning until a day before their final pre-season game. For me, that screams a massive red flag. Also, what I want to say here is the opportunity to change the team early on if key players have been missed. So what I mean by that is sometimes we make mistakes in FPL. We all do so. And sometimes we have missed that amazing value player. And whereas using those valuable key transfers to bring in those players, we can just use the wildcard if we really miss the boat and completely revamp the team with players that we know we want to bring in long term, like Saka and Foden, but also maybe those gems that we miss. For example, let's say Mohamed Kudus hits the ground running and we know this is a player that is essential for our teams. The wildcard enables us to do so. And finally, Also, it allows us to roll the transfer. So with this strategy, we'd roll the transfer in game week 2. We'd roll the transfer in game week 3. You can't roll during game week 4. So if you play the wildcard, you can't also roll a transfer. But then come game week 5, we should have 3 transfers in the bank. Keep rolling them until hopefully we bank 5 free transfers where we can play a mini wildcard around game weeks 5, 6 or 7. And I think that's going to put us in a really strong position where we can bring in the players that are fully fit going into game week 1. Bring in the players that will be eventually fully fit in game week 4. And then around game week 8, when others might be using their wildcard, we can use our mini wildcard of 5 free transfers in an ideal world to capitalize on other fixture swings. So that is my current chip strategy. Let's come into my team. So taking a look at my current FPL draft, and first up we have the goalkeepers. Now I am going back on my own word here because I have been rambling on all preseason about how 4.5 million goalkeepers are the route to go for. But at the time of recording, I'm currently leaning towards Nick Pope at 5 million. And it's also worth noting, I have been inclined to put David Raya in between the sticks. You will see at the bottom here, this team is going to be valued at 99 million. It actually has 1 million in the bank. And the reason being is I'm building this draft right now on the information that we know, and that has left me with 1 million in the bank. I could easily spend the money if I wanted to and bring in players that aren't actually in pre-season, but I really wanted to build a team right now of players that I actually know are going to feature for their teams and in particular positions. Spoiler alert, there are certain players like a Phil Foden or maybe even, as I've mentioned, a Mo Salah where I don't exactly know where they're going to fit into their respective teams due to new managers. And for that reason, I don't think I can justify those premium prices. So right now in the goalkeeper area, I'm actually able to afford a 5 million in Nick Pope. We spoke about those fixtures, Southampton followed by Bournemouth and Spurs. I can't actually identify right now who the best Newcastle defender is. I do not like the Dan Burn pick. I do think one of Livramento or Lewis Hall will emerge as brilliant options. But until we actually see that, I'm happy to spend 5 million on a Newcastle defensive coverage. But in the next 2 weeks, if we do see one of those 4.5 million options emerge as an essential pick, it will then leave me with the opportunity to downgrade the goalkeeper because realistically, 5 million for a Newcastle defender isn't ideal, and I am hoping that a 4.5 million will emerge. But right now, I think Nick Pope is a brilliant option for goalkeeper option in game week 1. So next up, moving into the defenders, and I've gone for a slightly different strategy here of having 2 6 million defenders in Saliba and Vardy. Now, I need to say first and foremost, I do think Trent Alexander-Arnold is a brilliant option at 7 million, but we need to remember, at the time of recording right now, end of July, we still have 2 weeks. I haven't seen Trent in this Arne Slot team yet, and for 7 million, I really want to be paying for a player that I know exactly where he's going to play and how he's going to influence the game. And right now, I haven't seen that with Trent because he hasn't been in pre-season. So until we see it, I'm not going to include him in a draft because I think at 7 million, I need to know exactly what I'm getting. And these two players, I think I know exactly what I'm getting. Arsenal in the opening 3 have great fixtures in game week 1 and in game week 3. When we talk about a lot of change at Liverpool and Chelsea, for example, City and Arsenal feel the most stable of all the teams and realistically the 2 best teams in the league defensively. So it's a bit stupid for me not to go for 2 brilliant options in those sides. So Saliba at 6 million and Vardy at 6 million. I'm going to put a bit of a player rotation here for the 5 players that you can see on your screens, but I want you to ignore the fact that Saliba is benched in game week 2 and Vardy is benched in game week 1 because if I'm paying 6 million for a defender, I am backing their defence in any fixture realistically. So they would feature, but the other 3 are really important. Because I'm only looking to play 3 in game weeks 1 to 3, I only need 1 of these 3 available to me each and every game week. Now, Mykolenko is the 4.5 million that I am selecting for my team. I think Everton could be once again very, very defensively sound with Sean Dyche. And looking at the Everton fixtures, I think he's a great play in game week 1 at home against Brighton, even though I do rate this Brighton team under the new young manager. Game week 2, obviously I'll be benching him away against Spurs, but this would be the opportunity for me to play maybe Harwood Bellis with that brilliant home fixture against Nottingham Forest. But again, Southampton, we don't really know what to predict with them. And then in game week 3, once again, Mykolenko has a good fixture at home against Bournemouth. So realistically, I'd be looking to play Saliba, Gavardi and Mykolenko. in game weeks 1 and game weeks 3. And then I'll be looking to play Saliba and Vardy out alongside Harwood Bellis in game week 2. So it begs the question, why is Barco in this team at 4 million? Well, I don't really think I need to invest tons of money into this defence outside of my 2 premiums. And I feel like Barco at 4 million, even though I might not play him and I might wildcard in game week 4 with the current strategy, I feel like he's one of those players that if he was to hit it off, I could be in a position where I haven't even played him in my team, but he could rise in price to 4.2 million. All it takes for him is to get an assist from a corner or maybe a free kick or maybe even a couple of clean sheets out of the blue. And I've suddenly got a player at 4 million who is already skyrocketed in price and I haven't even played him, which is a good thing in FPL. I know missing points isn't great, but if you've already got that player in your team, it means that when I come to Wildcard, I'm not having to pay over the odds for a player that I don't really love longer term. So that is the plan with defenders. I know I've got no Liverpool in there, but I actually think the fixtures are trickier than what they look. Away against Ipswich and away against Man United in game weeks 1 and game weeks 3. And I want to see a little bit more from this Arne Slot team with the key players involved. So that is going to be the defence, and you'll see a reason why I've gone for that defence as we move into the midfield. So moving into the midfielders here, and we've got quite an interesting selection to say the least. As we spoke about at the start of the video, there is no Mo Salah, and of course that is the big absentee in this team. And I can't sit here and say to you that Mo Salah is not a good option, because he clearly is. If I had all the budget in the world, he would obviously be in this team. And it probably is worth saying that I think it's easier to build a Mo Salah draft than an Erling Haaland draft, because the gap between Haaland and Watkins is so vast. It gives you so much more money to invest elsewhere in the squad. But at the time recording, I don't really know how I feel about Arne Slot's Liverpool team. I think we can see one or two things. We either see a new lease in life and we see an incredible run at the start of the season, which again isn't a problem because my strategy is to wildcard in game week 4. So if all of a sudden Darwin Núñez, Mo Salah, Trent become absolutely essential players, I'm only missing them for the opening 3 fixtures. Then I can bring them all in game week 4 with my wildcard strategy. So I feel quite content with going without Mo Salah, knowing that I can bring him in at the drop of a hat if I need to with my wildcard strategy. And as I've spoken about, Ipswich away, first game against newly promoted team, could go one of two ways. It's either a very, very tight affair, or Liverpool kind of welcome Ipswich to the league with a 5-0 drumming. And Man United away in game week 3 is not ideal at all. So I'm less bullish on the Liverpool fixtures, but I am still looking to cover myself, and that is where Szoboszlai comes in at 6.5 million. Now, yes, I might be jumping the gun, but we can only play off the underlying numbers that we have right now and what we've seen in pre-season. And if Arne Slot is to build up with 1 pivot, 2 10s or 2 false 9s, Szoboszlai is looking fantastic in that team. We're not seeing him as a Jordan Henderson box-to-box like we saw under Jurgen Klopp. And I really do believe there is a world-class player in Szoboszlai. And I think at 6.5 million, it is unbelievable value. And while I don't think it will cover Mo Salah, it just gives me a piece of that Liverpool attack if they were to go off in those opening game weeks. Outside of him, Odegaard is the perfect example of a player that I know I'm getting guaranteed minutes, guaranteed fitness, obviously being fully fit in pre-season, and great fixtures in the opening 3. And we also know that this is a top player who's had over 200 points in a season. I feel really confident going for Odegaard, with me not really being that bullish on Bukayo Saka, knowing he's had 0 minutes in pre-season so far. Outside of those two, Eze is currently at 7 million, but this is the one that I literally am 50-50 on. I think he's a brilliant option, but with no Mateta in game week 1 most likely, and of course Michael Olise in the league, I don't know exactly what kind of Eze we are going to be getting. And I don't even love the Crystal Palace opening fixtures, but it of course comes down to that talismanic theory. If Eze is going to be the main man in the Crystal Palace team, if Crystal Palace are going to do well, by default, we would expect Eze to do that. I do love Rashford. I do love Martinelli at 7 million, but I will have to see something in pre-season before I even consider those options. Lastly, Gordon at 7.5 million. With my strategy, he is just an absolute banker. I don't think we need to overthink it. Unbelievable last year, great fixtures, and I think he will be fully fit going into game week 1 with limited minutes in the Euros. And Eddie Howe is an attacking manager, so I think he is just absolutely banked into my team. And finally, Nkunku at 6.5 million. Now, we spoke about it. I have $1 million in the bank. I could upgrade that area, but right now, Cole Palmer not been seen in pre-season, and Nkunku playing plenty of minutes and plenty of responsibility in this Chelsea team. I think at 6.5 million, this is the steal of the season. And with Chelsea's fixtures in the first three, while it's not ideal in game week 1, 2 and 3 are not too bad. And I think Nkunku is just a lock in my team, unless we were to see an injury or some negative comments from Maresca in pre-season. But all in all, I'm really content with the midfield. The big thing to note is no player between 9 million and of course 12.5. But with the wildcard in game week 4, I don't mind changing my team up if I need to around that period. So finally, moving into the forwards, and you can see here that I have given myself a little bit of a headache with this team, as I have got basically 8 players that could play every single week in the attacking third. But currently got Chris Wood. If we're looking for fixtures in the opening 3, Forest are incredible. And I think with Chris Wood, we are going to get one of two things. We're either going to get Chris Wood at Newcastle, where he's going to really frustrate us, or we're going to see the Chris Wood that we saw at the back end of last season for Nottingham Forest, where he was incredible. Problem with Chris Wood, of course, is Ewoni. Could we see him come into the team and take minutes from Chris Wood? Well, at the time of recording, we haven't seen really any proper fitness from Ewoni. So right now, Chris Wood is that #1 man for Forest. And I really do think he does balance the team with pace out wide with Hudson-Odoi and Elanga. So really like Chris Wood for those opening fixtures, and it gets a piece of that Nottingham Forest attack that was quite impressive last season. Haaland is in. We spoke about this. If I'm avoiding Mo Salah, I have to have Erling Haaland. I can't imagine a world where I don't have one of those two in the team. The reason why I'm currently going for Haaland over Mo Salah is it comes back to what I said. I want a team and players that I know exactly what I'm getting from them. And I get that with Man City. Chelsea away in game week 1 is not a bad fixture at all. Game week 2 at home against Ipswich just looks like a banker fixture. And game week 3 away against West Ham, once again, don't think that's a bad fixture at all for a team like Man City. And I think with me, I know exactly what I'm getting with Haaland. I'm getting the #9, who is probably going to get 25 to 30 goals. And in those opening 3 fixtures, I just prefer him to that of Mo Salah, where I have a lot of uncertainty about the manager, the team, and the positions that he will take up on the field. I just like the banker that Haaland has given us. And finally, the most locked player of any team is going to be Alexander Isak. I think it's crazy not to go with him on penalties, guaranteed minutes, amazing fixtures, clinical finisher. He is just the most no-brainer of this entire draft. So that is the squad right now. 1 million in the bank. So there's plenty of wiggle room with this team. Let me know recommendations in the comment section. Finally, I just want to show you how this team would look over the opening 3 game weeks and who would be benched and of course who would be captain. So finally, taking a look at how my team will look for game weeks 1, 2 and 3 and how I would plan on just rolling my transfers, fingers crossed if I do get lucky with any injuries. This is how the team would officially look for game week 1. And you can see here, Pope at home against Southampton is absolutely delicious. The back 3 is Saliba, Vardy and Mykolenko. I think that's absolutely fine for game week 1. A midfielder, Szoboszlai, Gordon, Odegaard and Eze. And a front 3 of Wood, Isak and Haaland. And Nkunku on the bench. And that could definitely change in this team. But I think rightly so, he will be first sub against that Man City defence. And then of course, the captaincy for game week 1 would be between Erling Haaland and Alexander Isak. But I do think Isak would grab it for me in that opening fixture where I would expect Newcastle to put a few goals in against Southampton. But of course, closer to the time, I will get a bit more scared, I'm sure of it, and maybe lean towards Erling Haaland. But I'm glad to have those two as my captaincy picks. Now, coming into game week 2, this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. I would require the services of Harwood Bellis at home against Nottingham Forest alongside Saliba and Vardy, which is absolutely fine. Pope away against Bournemouth. This is where I get the headache of having my team selection. Nkunku away against Wolves, I feel like I'd have to play him because it would be quite a scary prospect owning him and not playing him in a fixture like that. Gordon away against Bournemouth, Odegaard away against Aston Villa and Eze at home against West Ham. You can see on the bench there, Szoboszlai at home against Brentford on the bench. I do think in this one particular fixture, maybe the argument would be to bench Odegaard and bring in Szoboszlai if we see really good things in game week 1 and play the front 3 of Wood, Isak and Erling Haaland, who of course would have the captaincy at home against Ipswich. So I'll be pretty content with that team. And again, this will be the first opportunity we have to roll the free transfer. And unless any injuries happen, you can see this squad is really well stacked going into that game week. And I'll be really happy with rolling the transfer. So coming into game week 3, the final game week of this specific team, Nick Pope at home against Spurs. While it isn't ideal, I still back Newcastle defensively against a lot of teams this season, and I do think Pope is a good option, if not for a clean sheet, at least for some save points. Saliba with that home fixture against Brighton, Vardy away against West Ham, and Mikalenko at home against Bournemouth. Absolutely fine for this team. Moving into the midfield, few tricky fixtures, but Nkunku at home against Crystal Palace looks great. Gordon at home against Spurs, I fancy him to score against any team. And of course, Odegaard at home against Brighton. Those are the three favourable fixtures, but Szoboszlai away against Man United or Eze away against Chelsea would be one of those in-week decisions that I would have to make for the team. And I would like to think that either Chelsea or Man United either look terrible or Szoboszlai or Eze look amazing, where it just forces my hand to go for that obvious choice, because up front, Haaland, Isak and Wood would obviously play in their respective positions. And then it would come down to another captaincy decision, which likely would be Erling Haaland. But of course, with Mo Salah away against Man United, I don't feel like I'm missing out on Mo Salah's captaincy pick for that specific game week. So again, a great opportunity for me once again to roll the free transfer going into what would be a game week 4 wildcard. So that's how the team would look for the opening three. It's a very aggressive strategy going for this, but I think we get the best of both worlds, as what I've mentioned at the start of the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's latest team selection video. I do think this is the most thought that I've put into the team, and I really feel confident about the selection and the chip strategy that I'm going for. Now, of course, we still have over 2 weeks until that game week 1 deadline. So if you want to stay up to date with my team and of course with daily fantasy content, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. It'll be amazing to have you on board during this preseason. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please do drop a like, aiming for 100 on this video. If you have any questions, please do put them in the comment section. Have an amazing day and we'll talk real soon. Take care. Cheers.